Hey, it's A Helm Collector here. In today's video, we're taking a look at the 4-panel death card of Gottfried Weiss. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So going from panel 1 here, "This, O Jesus, you graciously bear for me. For me, the sinner, how should I not love you, you Jesus, who loves me so much? My Jesus mercy, 300 days indulgence." And then moving to the interior of the card here, we have a nice photo of Gottfried, and interestingly, it looks like it was taken outside. We have like some trees or maybe some other foliage back there. And going from the top, "As a pious memory and prayer to Gottfried Weiss, from Leonberg, Obergefreiter in a Gebirgsjager Regiment, participant in the Western Campaign, born on April 3rd, 1914, fell on June 3rd, 1942 in the fighting in Russia." Now, I did actually find a casualty record for Gottfried. I'll go ahead and put that up on screen. He was a member of the 8th Company of Gebirgsjager Regiment 206, which was part of the 7th Gebirgs Division, and he would die from shrapnel wounds to the head and chest at a field hospital 2 kilometers west of Bulgorby. Now, apparently, the 5th Jager Division actually had a cemetery there, and his casualty record notes that he was actually buried there for a while before eventually being transferred to the Korpovo military cemetery. Now, interestingly, we've covered the 7th Gebirgs Division a few times lately, and what's interesting is even though the 7th was actually serving in Finland, a portion of them have been sent down to the area of Lake Ilmen and were participating in fighting in that region and taking horrible casualties. The last card I believe we looked at was saying that after being in combat for a few weeks, the companies were down to strengths of 12 to 14 men, which is quite low, given the fact that companies are supposed to be, I believe, 180 guys. Now, I do actually have a book on the 7th Gebirgs Division, which is Schicksalsweg und Kampf der Bergschuh Division by Roland Kaltenegger. And there are actually some references in the books here to what happened at the time of Gottfried's death on June 3rd. Specifically, we can see there's actually a map here on page 152. Der Angriff zum Gridino-Weg, which we can see the village of Gridino up there. And we can actually see the 206th Gebirgsjager Division actually listed there as well near Kampfgruppe Shore. So I'm going to go ahead and read to you. I translated a few of the paragraphs here to kind of give you a feel for what was happening at the time of Gottfried's death. But things only got really serious again when Y-Day, the day of the attack on Gridino-Weg, was finally set, namely for June 3rd, 1942. The fighters of the assault group lay tense to their starting positions. The 1st Battalion, Gebirgsjager Regiment 206, which was reinforced by assault guns, was on the left at the seam of Group Shore. The Gebirgsjagers were supported by their comrades from the 1st Battalion, Gebirgs Artillery Regiment 82, whose command post was near the regiment's command post, namely at point 34.3. The VB had once again been given the responsible task of ensuring fire support through their courageous efforts. With such instructions and support, the mountain infantry began the attack. The 1st Battalion, 206th Gebirgsjager Regiment, advanced quickly after the artillery had done valuable preparatory work. In addition, the carefully evaluated reconnaissance results had revealed a weakly occupied spot in the Russian line, through which the Gebirgsjagers skillfully fought their way. The greatest losses in the attack were not due to enemy action, but to the company's own Stukas, which only joined the fighting at this point in the battle. A bomb fell right in the middle of the 1st Company, and a platoon suffered considerable losses. The attack by the 3rd Battalion, 218th Gebirgsjager Regiment, was different from that by the 1st Battalion, 206th Gebirgsjager Regiment. As soon as the attack began, all communications with the artillery and heavy infantry weapons were cut off by enemy action. Total chaos was only prevented by the courageous use of signalers. The Shore Group also had to deal with difficulties of a very different kind. In the southeast corner of the so-called Shorewald, it came across a particularly well-fortified Russian position that had not been recognized by its own reconnaissance. The attack initially came to a halt there as the Russians, encouraged by senior officers and commissars, stubbornly defended themselves. The Jaegers had barely recovered from their shock when their attack threatened to come to a halt again, when an assault gun that had been called in to provide support caught fire from the phosphorus bombardment and was put out of action. This critical situation was ultimately mastered by the dashing efforts of Hauptmann Schor, who directed the fire of a gun from the front line with shouts and flares, and supported by the 3rd Company, which took up base. Only when the darkness of night fell over the battlefield did the fighting subside. Oberjäger Oskar Bonert describes the first day of the attack on the Gridino-Weg. At dawn on June 3rd, we, the dispatch battalion, moved into our staging area behind the assault company. We knew the enemy situation from the previous briefing at the sandpit. The high forest with the Russian positions was right in front of us at this point. We dug ourselves into the shot-up young forest and waited for the attack to begin. At around 8 a.m., we heard the dull firing of our heavy artillery from afar. Before the shells reached the enemy bunker line, however, there was a sudden crash and roar around us, and the dispatcher lying next to me was already wounded by shrapnel. Our mountain guns and heavy mortars soon joined the hail of other supporting weapons. When the few Stukas and bombers had dropped their bombs and the heavy anti-tank guns had shot the bunkers to pieces with direct fire, the fire was brought forward by the VBs. The assault guns rolled forward, the fighters and pioneers followed suit. The attack went quickly through the Russian bunker line. The platoons securing the attack wedge followed to the right and left. We messengers trusted ourselves to the protection of the assault guns and followed in their tracks. Through high forest, over forest clearings and clearings, we reached the target before the expected time and were close to the Gridino road. Here, the Soviets had built a second line of bunkers, which they defended fiercely and doggedly. Despite heavy fire from artillery, infantry guns, mortars, and heavy machine guns, the crews did not surrender. Again and again, the bursts of their machine guns and small arms passed over us so that we had to take full cover. The Jaegers of our pioneer groups attacked the bunkers, taking advantage of the blind spots and finishing them off with hand grenades and concentrated charges. The courage and bravery of these comrades helped the attack to be a success. Although the attack objective had been achieved, the attack was pushed forward until it was just before high forest. There, the enemy again established itself. To complete the overall attack plan, a combat group from the 5th Jager Division had to join us from the runway along the Gridino leg in order to close that ring that was still open to the north side and destroy the encircled enemy units. We did hear the noise of battle from the west, but there was no sign of the combat group. A radio inquiry revealed that the attack had been confirmed. We were in a very threatening situation. The battalion had driven a deep wedge into the enemy position and was now in danger of being surrounded. Our battalion commander then decided to personally contact the combat group. He drove through the Russians with an assault gun along the Gridino road. We silently wished our lieutenant every soldier's luck on his journey, both for him personally and for our battalion. The journey was successful. He was back with us an hour later. The combat group resumed the attack and established contact with us. We had long since dug in and were ready to defend ourselves. We, the messengers, had also reinforced the thin front line to the extent that we were dispensable at the battalion command post. So I was lying with a comrade from the messenger squadron on the edge of a forest meadow. The Russians were barely 100 meters opposite us. The enemy artillery was constantly firing nuisance fire. At around 7 p.m., we suddenly heard the sound of engines from the enemy side, and the first T-34s were already in front of us. The superiority was too great. The front began to falter. It was our Oberleutnant who stood upright and encouraged the fighters to hold on. Several enemy tanks were shot down. Others that managed to break through were killed further back. The night brought various Russian counterattacks, but no breakthroughs were made. It only became critical at the infantry gun position, when the Russians attempted to break through from the pocket. The gun crew, radio operators, and telephone operators repelled the enemy attack. The enemy, according to our Oberjäger Bonert, in his report on the first day of the attack on the Gridino road, had many dead and wounded in the process. So, bit of that translation was a tad rough. Google Translate seemed to struggle a bit with some of it, but I think overall we get the picture that this was brutal, vicious fighting. And of course, Gottfried here suffering from shrapnel wounds. That seems to be a very common injury in this particular battle between the artillery bombardment, the Stukas, and everything else that was going on. Now, one of the odd things, though, is that the Bulgorby Forest, where this field hospital that Gottfried died in was located, was fairly far away from where the fighting was. About 228 kilometers per my reckoning. So it's possible that he'd actually been wounded in an earlier engagement and had died at the hospital, on June 3rd. It just happened to coincide with this action. However, Volksbund, the official German, graves, maintenance, registry, everything, notes his death as June 4th, 1942, not June 3rd, which I think would give enough time for him to have been triage closer to the front line and then moved further away to the safer hospital. That seems a bit more likely to me, but I'd be curious to hear what you guys think down below. I do also have 3 other cards for members of the 7th Gebirgs Division. Alphonse Christel, who was a Jaeger in the 10th Company of Gebirgsjager Regiment 206, was killed by an artillery shot to the head at Raltsy, Russia, on April 11th, 1942. Michael Petz, who was a Gefreiter in the 12th Company of Gebirgsjager Regiment 206, was killed by an artillery hit to the chest at Yasvy, Russia, on April 23rd, 1942. And in the booklet for the Gustav Hauptmann Shoe Company, we have a reference to Anton Reiniers, who was a Gefreiter in the 9th Company of Gebirgsjager Regiment 218, and he was annihilated by artillery at Kirstingen, Finland, on August 10th, 1943. Now, moving down to the bottom of the card here. You were so sweet, so brave, so good to us, and also to your loved ones. Your cheerful spirit, your cheerful courage could never sadden a human heart. A short dream, a short happiness was only granted to you on earth. You died and will never return. Rest, sleep well, in God's peace. Then moving to panel 3 here. The friends at your return were not granted to you, and those who loved you still weep for you so much. You sink like roses sink when they are in full bloom, and bitter hot tears flow because you had to leave us like that. The joy of hope is now over. You will never see your home again. We are bowed down by pain and suffering. Your place in our circle is empty. Now you are slumbering away from us, beloved. Yours is the rest, and ours is the sorrow. There, where the palms of peace blow, we'll see each other again. My Jesus, mercy, our Father, Hail Mary. And then moving to the back of the card here. Holy Mary Magdalene, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. My Jesus, mercy, 300 days indulgence. So yeah, overall, really interesting card. The 7th Gebirgs Division has been really interesting to research over these past couple videos. And, like I said, it's kind of a fluke that these cards all ended up so close together. This was part of a lot that I bought a few years ago that happened to have a lot of Gebirgsjager cards in it. Just so happened that a lot of them ended up being tied to the same unit. Overall, I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment down below. Love hearing from you. Thank you all for watching. Happy collecting, and I'll see you all again very soon.